Yo, to Shifty Crew, what is good with y'all today? It's your boy Bwithdashifts. Today we got 10 wild animals you can easily keep as pets. Make sure y'all go follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Bwithdashifts1. Let's get straight into it, man.
It gets thrown around carelessly. People use it to mean an animal that lets me touch it without biting me, which is not domestication.
Ew.
That is tolerance, and tolerance is temporary.
What is
True
that
domestication
thing,
is a genetic process that takes place over generations, sometimes centuries, in which an animal population is selectively bred until its behavior, its physiology, and most people have no idea
those things
how many
jump off the
species
mountains,
we have
though. Those
actually
things are
pulled it
threats.
off with.
I'm not gonna lie.
Or how many wild animals alive right now are closer to that threshold than you might think. These are 10 wild animals that can be or already have been surprisingly easy to domesticate. Starting at number 10 is the wild boar. And this might sound like cheating because domestic pigs already exist. But what most people do not realize is just how quickly and how completely wild boars can be brought back across the domestication line. The domestic pig was derived from the Eurasian wild boar roughly 9,000 years ago in multiple independent domestication events across Europe and Asia. And the genetic distance between a wild boar and a domestic pig is, by the standards of domestication, almost trivially small. Researchers in Russia documented feral pigs, domestic pigs that had escaped and gone wild, reverting to wild boar-like appearance and behavior within just a few generations, growing coarser hair, developing tusks, and becoming more aggressive. But the reverse is equally true. Wild boar piglets captured young and raised in human environments become tractable remarkably fast. Within a single generation of selective breeding, researchers have produced boars that are calmer, more tolerant of handling, and less reactive to human presence than their wild parents. And within 3 to 4 generations, the physical changes begin. Shorter snouts, curlier tails, floppy ears, the same suite of traits that scientists call domestication syndrome, which appears across virtually every domesticated species. A wildlife management researcher in Texas who had been working with captured wild boar populations for over a decade described the speed of behavioral change as almost unsettling, noting that sows born in captivity from wild-caught parents were, by their second litter, functionally indistinguishable in temperament from farm-raised heritage breed pigs.
That's crazy, man.
The wild boar is not a candidate for domestication.
Freaky-ass pig,
It is an animal that has already been domesticated, that remembers how to be wild, and that can be brought back with surprising ease. Number 9 is the mouflon, a small, sturdy wild sheep native to the mountainous regions of Corsica, Sardinia, Cyprus, and parts of Western Asia, and the animal from which virtually all domestic sheep are descended. The mouflon is the ancestral model, the original hardware that humans spent thousands of years modifying into the wool-producing pasture grazing. Profoundly docile animal that now numbers over 1 billion worldwide. What makes the mouflon interesting from a domestication standpoint is that, unlike many wild ancestors of domestic animals, it is still very much around, and it still responds to the same pressures that made it domesticable in the first place. Mouflons are naturally gregarious, forming tight social groups with clear hierarchies, which is the single most important prerequisite for domestication, because it means the animals already understand the concept of following a leader.
That's crazy.
You just need to make that leader a human. They are also relatively small. Rams weigh between 55 and 120 pounds, which makes them physically manageable in a way that, say, a Cape buffalo is not. Wild mouflons captured for conservation breeding programs have been noted to habituate to human handlers within weeks rather than months, and their lambs, when bottle-raised, bond to humans with an intensity that any sheep farmer would recognize immediately. A conservation biologist working with a mouflon population on Cyprus described the transition from wild-caught to handler-friendly as almost disappointingly easy, adding that the biggest challenge was not getting them to accept human presence, but preventing them from becoming so attached to their handlers that they refused to integrate with other mouflons. The mouflon is, in a sense, a domestic sheep waiting to happen again. At number 8 is the red fox.
That's crazy,
and this entry comes with one of the most famous experiments in the history of domestication science. In 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev began a breeding program in Novosibirsk, Siberia, using wild-caught silver foxes, a color variant of the red fox,
That's not
with
silver.
The goal of understanding the genetic mechanisms behind domestication.
That's red. That's
The rules were
orange.
simple. In each generation, only the foxes that showed the least fear and the least aggression toward humans were allowed to breed. No other selection criteria. No training.
Wow, man.
Just choose the tamest 10% and let them reproduce. Within 6 generations, some foxes were wagging their tails at the approach of humans. By generation 10, they were licking handlers' hands and whimpering for attention. By generation 30, the foxes were, for all practical purposes, behaving like dogs, seeking out human contact, responding to gestures and vocal cues, and displaying the full suite of domestication syndrome traits: floppy ears, curled tails, spotted coats, and shortened snouts. The experiment, which is still running today at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics, has now passed generation 60, and the domesticated foxes are so behaviorally modified that they are sold as pets in Russia. What makes this result so extraordinary is the speed. 60 generations of a fox is roughly 60 years. Domestication of dogs from wolves is estimated to have taken thousands of years. Belyaev's foxes suggest that, given the right selection pressure, domestication can happen orders of magnitude faster than anyone previously believed. And that the red fox was, genetically speaking, ready to be domesticated all along. It just needed someone to ask. Number 7 is the European rabbit. And the rabbit is another animal that has already been domesticated, but whose wild counterpart remains so close to the domestic version that the line between them is practically a suggestion.
Jackrabbits are mean,
All domestic rabbit breeds, from the tiny Netherland dwarf to the massive Flemish giant, descend from the European wild rabbit. And domestication occurred remarkably recently, likely beginning in French monasteries around the 5th or 6th century, which makes the domestic rabbit one of the last major livestock species to be domesticated. Wild European rabbits are naturally social, living in complex warren systems called colonies that can contain dozens of individuals, and their social structure is built around tolerance, group cohesion, and a willingness to share space, all traits that translate directly into an animal that can live comfortably in human environments. Wild rabbit kittens handled from birth become tame within days, not weeks, and breeding studies have shown that selecting for docility produces measurable behavioral changes in as few as 2 to 3 generations. A researcher in Spain working on wild rabbit conservation described hand-raised wild kittens as essentially indistinguishable from pet rabbits by the time they are weaned, with the only reliable difference being a slightly higher startle response that faded with continued handling. The rabbit did not require some dramatic genetic overhaul to become a domestic animal. It was already social, already burrowing, already comfortable in groups, and already reproducing at a rate that makes selective breeding almost absurdly efficient. The wild rabbit is less a challenge to domesticate, and more an animal that was always one monastery and a few generations of patient monks away from becoming a pet. Number 6 is the Asian elephant, and this entry requires a careful distinction because the Asian elephant is, depending on your definition, either one of the most successfully domesticated large animals in human history, or one of the most successfully tamed ones, and the difference matters. Asian elephants have been captured from the wild and trained for human use for over 4,000 years. Logging, warfare, transportation, and ceremonial roles, and they form working relationships with individual handlers, called mahouts, that can last decades. An elephant named Parbati, who worked with a single mahout in Assam, India for over 40 years,
If he doesn't see you,
responded
you're
to
gonna
more than
die when
100
it
verbal
walks over you,
commands,
man.
and was described by her handler as understanding not just the commands, but the intent behind them, adjusting her behavior based on context in ways that went far beyond simple conditioning. The reason elephants are not typically classified as fully domesticated is that their breeding has never been systematically controlled by humans the way it has for dogs, cattle, or sheep. Most working elephants throughout history have been wild-caught and individually trained. But the capacity for domestication is clearly there. Elephants are intensely social, form deep bonds,
man.
have extended juvenile dependency periods, calves stay with their mothers for years, and demonstrate the cognitive flexibility to adapt to human environments.
Yo, why did it just pour mud on itself if it's raining? It's not needing to take a mud shower, even though mud is not getting you clean. It's literally raining right now there. Elephants are stupid, man.
Captive breeding programs in Thailand and Myanmar have produced multi-generational lines of elephants born and raised in human care. And these animals show reduced fear responses and increased social tolerance compared to wild-caught individuals. The Asian elephant has not been fully domesticated largely because humans never needed to. Wild catching and training was sufficient. But the biological prerequisites are all present. And the relationship between humans and elephants is already so deeply intertwined that the final step would be less a revolution than a formality. If you're enjoying this countdown, you can get early access to all Loving Feral videos over on our Spotify channel. Number 5 is the reindeer.
The reindeer?
And the reindeer is one of the most quietly successful domestication stories in human history.
So you're telling me I could hold a fat guy hostage and then tame a bunch of reindeer and then just have my own Santa Claus? And I can paint a reindeer's nose red. I could have Rudolph and Santa at once. Wow, man. Why don't malls start doing this when they want the mall Santas, man? They just get random crackheads on the side of the street. Why not do my plan? Mall Santas would be way better than that.
Reindeer have been herded, managed, and selectively bred by indigenous peoples of the Arctic and subarctic, the Smi of Scandinavia, the Nenets and Evenki of Siberia, and others for at least 2,000 years, and possibly much longer. What makes reindeer so amenable to domestication is a combination of traits that reads like a checklist designed by someone trying to invent the perfect domesticable animal. They are highly gregarious, forming herds of thousands. They have a strong following instinct, naturally moving as a group behind a leader. They tolerate close proximity to humans with relatively little habituation. They eat lichen and tundra vegetation that no other livestock species can digest, meaning they do not compete with human food sources. And they provide milk, meat, hides, antler, and transportation, which makes them one of the most versatile domestic animals on the planet. The Nenets people of the Yamal Peninsula in northwestern Siberia manage herds of up to 10,000 reindeer, migrating with them across 700 miles of tundra each year. And the relationship is so deeply co-evolved that the reindeer depend on the Nenets as much as the Nenets migrating with them across 700 miles of tundra each year. And the relation...
Is this real footage of Rudolph trying to join the pack? Is it? This might be. Rudolph got pissed on one foggy night. I'm not gonna lie, Rudolph. Hey, you had to do that? That's your gang initiation? Wow, hey, you deserve it at that point, man. You went from out of the gang to the leader? Wow.
The relationship is so deeply co-evolved that the reindeer depend on the Nenets as much as the Nenets depend on the reindeer. The herders protect the animals from predators and guide them to grazing grounds.
Why does that deer
and the reindeer provide virtually everything the Nenets need to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. A Nenets herder named Saratetto, interviewed by a Finnish documentary crew, described his reindeer not as livestock but as partners, noting that individual animals recognized his voice and would come to him when called by name.
Is this how Santa was back in the day? Up in the North Pole? Santa would just say, Rudolph, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Dashin, Princeton, whatever the dumbass deers were named. I mean, bro, he could just call their names like a dog and they would come. Wow.
The reindeer did not resist domestication. It walked into it. Because the arrangement made as much sense for the reindeer as it did for the humans.
Wow, that's crazy.
Number 4 is the mink, specifically the American mink, which has been
I'm sorry, bro. I'm skipping over this show. I can't sit here and look at this ugly-ass animal. Yo, what the fuck is that? It looks like a mouse with a rat with porcupine Miniature hare. What the fuck is that, yo? I'm skipping over this, man. We're going on 3.
Is the rock dove,
Ugly ass bird.
better known to everyone who has ever
Rock
eaten lunch
dove.
in a city park as the pigeon.
Okay.
The domestic pigeon
okay.
is descended from the wild rock dove,
Wow, man.
a cliff-dwelling bird native to southern Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia.
Wow.
And it was one of the earliest birds domesticated by humans, with evidence of pigeon keeping dating back at least 5,000 years to ancient Mesopotamia.
Wow,
what makes the rock dove so easy to domesticate is a set of behavioral traits that are almost tailor-made for coexistence with humans. Rock doves are colonial nesters. They live in large groups on cliff faces and in cave systems, which means they are already pre-adapted to living in dense, confined spaces, which is essentially what a dovecote or a city ledge is. They are non-migratory, meaning they stay close to their nesting site, and they have an extraordinary homing instinct that allows them to navigate back to their home loft from distances exceeding 1,000 miles. A trait that humans exploited for messenger services for thousands of years before the invention of the telegraph. Wild rock doves captured and housed in lofts will begin breeding within weeks, and their offspring, raised in the presence of humans, are tame enough to handle by the time they fledge. Charles Darwin was so fascinated by the pigeon's domestication that he devoted an entire chapter of On the Origin of Species to the bird, using the extraordinary diversity of domestic pigeon breeds. From the fantail to the tumbler to the pouter, as evidence that selection, whether natural or artificial, could produce dramatic physical and behavioral changes within a single species. The rock dove did not need to be convinced to live with humans. It was already living on the same cliffs we were, eating the same grain, and nesting in the same structures. Domestication was less a process and more a mutual arrangement that both species simply drifted into. Number 2 is the wild turkey, and this might be the most underappreciated domestication success story in the Americas. The wild turkey was domesticated by indigenous peoples in Mesoamerica at least 2,000 years ago. And the domestic turkey that now appears on roughly 88% of American Thanksgiving tables is the direct descendant of those early captive populations. What makes the wild turkey so amenable to domestication is, frankly, a little embarrassing for the turkey, because the traits that made it a good candidate are essentially the traits of an animal that is not particularly committed to self-preservation. Wild turkeys are large, ground-dwelling birds that roost in predictable locations, move in predictable patterns, forage in open areas where they are easy to find and follow, and respond to captivity with a level of acceptance that borders on resignation. Wild turkey poults, chicks, captured and hand-raised, will imprint on their human handler within hours and follow them with the same devotion they would show to a mother hen. And this imprinting is so strong that hand-raised wild turkeys will continue to seek human company even after they are fully grown and physically capable of leaving. A wildlife rehabilitator in Virginia who raised orphaned wild turkey poults described them as dogs with feathers and worse judgment, noting that the birds would follow her around the property, come when called, and roost on the porch railing at night rather than retreating to the trees. The wild turkey's path to domestication required so little modification of its base behavior that the domestic turkey is, genetically, still remarkably close to its wild ancestor. The primary differences are size, breast muscle mass, and a near total loss of the ability to fly, the last of which the domestic turkey does not seem to have noticed or minded. And at number 1, the wild animal that is arguably the easiest to domesticate on the planet is the gray wolf.
Wolf.
This is not speculation. This is history. The gray wolf was the first animal ever domesticated by humans. Somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago. The date range is wide because the process was so gradual that pinpointing its beginning is like trying to identify the exact moment a friendship starts. What emerged from that process is the domestic dog. An animal so thoroughly domesticated that it has fundamentally reshaped its own cognition to revolve around humans. Dogs can read human facial expressions, follow human pointing gestures, a skill that no other animal, including chimpanzees, reliably performs, and they produce oxytocin, the bonding hormone, when they make eye contact with their owners. A biochemical response that mirrors the bond between human parents and their children. But the remarkable thing is not that wolves became dogs. It is how willing wolves were to start the process.
Wow, man.
Wolves are intensely social, pack-oriented animals with complex communication systems, clear social hierarchies, cooperative hunting strategies, and extended parental care. A behavioral profile that maps almost perfectly onto human social structure. The leading theory is that domestication began not because humans captured wolves, but because wolves chose to associate with humans, following nomadic groups to scavenge from kills and campsites, with the boldest and most tolerant individuals gradually integrating into human social groups over generations.
Wow.
A wolf biologist who spent 20 years studying wild packs in Yellowstone described wolves as social specialists, noting that their ability to read the intentions and emotions of other pack members, to cooperate, to negotiate, to reconcile after conflict, was the same cognitive toolkit that allowed them to eventually read and respond to humans. The wolf did not need to be broken or forced into domestication. It was, in a sense, already halfway there, because the social architecture that makes a wolf is the same architecture that makes a dog a dog. We did not invent the bond between humans and canines. We just formalized an arrangement that both species had been building toward for tens of thousands of years. If you made it this far, thank you for watching.
Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Peace out, y'all. Bye. Toodles!